Hello, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and will be your host for this webinar today. For those of you who are dialing in from your phone, if you could let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the phone number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive any relevant follow-up information. Now, if you are new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. We're glad to have you. CAC was founded in 2001 to support every person in every industry and every job so they can thrive in their work and their life after a diagnosis. Cancer and Careers also works with companies to develop their internal systems of support for employees navigating illness at work. This is a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer for people with cancer, as well as their caregivers, healthcare providers, coworkers, really anyone who is touched by cancer. These include a comprehensive website, which is available in both English and Spanish, as well as a publication library available in English and Spanish. You'll also see on our website access to career coaching, resume review, financial and technology grants, access to experts for one-on-one support, and educational events like this one. And I'm going to be back at the end of Julie's presentation today to talk about a little bit about what we have coming up. Now, some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please refer to our Zoom user guide, which is listed on this slide and is being shared in the chat right now as well, or reach out to Zoom support using the contact info on this slide. Also, please note today's presentation is copyrighted, therefore the use of AI assistance and/or transcribing or recording devices of any kind by attendees is not allowed. Those found to be using AI or other recording or transcription software during CAC programming will be removed from the event, and you will be permitted to return without the AI recording or transcription software. Real-time closed captioning is available for today's event for those who need it, and a caption recording of this webinar will be archived on our website following the session. To request any additional reasonable accommodations, please send an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org at least 24 hours before our next live session. For those of you who are seeking continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. And please note you are required to complete both the evaluation and pass the post-test to be eligible for CEs or PDCs. More information on how to access those will be shared throughout the webinar. And if you're unable to complete those today, that is totally fine. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. with all of the links and information in there as well. And for everyone here, please know that we love hearing from you both during our live webinar and after. So as you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact with today's event as it's happening. In your features panel, you'll see a chat box where you can feel free to use it to communicate with us or other attendees. However, it's important to note that the chat box is not private and will show your first and last name. So that's something to be mindful of when or if you decide to use it. You'll also see a Q&A box in that features panel. If you have any questions during Julie's presentation, please drop those in the Q&A box and we'll do our best to get to everyone's questions at the end of the session. Just try not to put them in the chat box as we might miss them. You want to put the questions into the Q&A box. And we know the importance of privacy, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. Again, we'll do our best to answer everyone's questions, but please be patient. If we don't get to your question today, or if you think of other questions later on, please send us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll make sure we get you an answer as soon as we can. Now, additionally, your feedback on this program means the world to us. All of us at CAC are dedicated to creating the best possible programs, and it's through hearing from you, your insights and observations, what worked, what didn't work. This is how we learn and can make these the best that they can be. So not only does your voice make a big difference in helping us help others, sharing your experience with our funders, always anonymously, this illustrates the true impact of our support and allows us to continue offering these webinars free of charge. So you can access the evaluation for today's webinar using this QR code that's on your screen right now, or via the link in the chat box. And again, we'll be sharing it a few more times throughout the day, as well as the email tomorrow that you'll be receiving no later than 5 p.m. So thank you so much in advance for taking the time to share your thoughts. Now, thanks in part to our support from P&G Beauty, Genentech, Blood Cancer United, and Johnson & Johnson, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer our 12th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about the work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, we would like to thank Cancer and Careers' year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing our resources and services free of charge. Now, today we are focusing on a specific element of the job search process, which is networking. Now, in general, networking may tend to make some people feel nervous, but today we're really going to make you more comfortable by covering the basics of networking, why it's important, and how to effectively network. So regardless of how you network, it's critical to get comfortable with it, as it's an essential part of job searching and has shown from time and time again that it's crucial for landing a job. Now, to take us through this topic, I am thrilled to welcome back Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find work that is gratifying. And Julie is one of our original coaches here at Cancer and Careers. We were just talking, it's been 19 years that she has been volunteering for us. So additionally, Julie is also the coach that does our resume review service, which we hope you'll utilize after today's webinar if you haven't already. Like I said earlier, there's going to be time for questions, so drop those in the Q&A box if you have any. But for now, I will turn it over to Julie to get us started. Welcome,
So
Julie.
much. Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Well, good afternoon, good evening. So today's webinar is going to dig deep into the how-tos of networking that are effective no matter what, as well as specific tips for networking virtually, and we will have some time for Q&A. The first thing I want to say is, a little bit more personal. I will say that networking is the single most important skill that I've developed, which has made me successful in business. It's enhanced my life through starting my own business, multiple personal crises, 9/11, the Great Recession, and the pandemic. So let's move on. Let's start with what networking is and some statistics, if we can go to the next slide. So networking here is an ongoing, interactive process of creating and nurturing productive relationships being key, interactive and ongoing also very important. And if you look at these stats, research shows approximately 70 to 85% of jobs are actually found through networking. That is through people who know you and people you know and new people that you meet. There's something that is called the hidden job market, and that's somewhere around 70% of jobs are never ever posted publicly. So that means that if you're only applying online, you're missing a very large portion of opportunities in that hidden job market. And even when jobs are posted, candidates who are referred, someone who knows someone at the company, are much more likely to get interviews. So the takeaway here is simple. Networking isn't extra, it's essential. It gives you access to opportunities you otherwise wouldn't find and helps you stand out in what is right now in 2026 a very crowded applicant pool. So let's jump into why networking feels hard and what are the common barriers on the next slide. So why does networking feel hard? Chris, could you move on to the next slide? Oh, thanks. So while there's no doubt that networking is an extremely important business and personal skill, unfortunately, networking can be misunderstood and it can be underutilized. So before we really talk about the how-tos of networking, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the emotional, psychological, mental aspects of networking, because those things tend to be the biggest barriers. And I want to acknowledge that it's very important for most people. Networking isn't a skill issue, it's an emotional or psychological issue. So if networking has ever felt uncomfortable, as Scott mentioned, draining or even discouraging, you are not alone. And especially if you've been through something as significant as a cancer diagnosis and treatment, there are additional layers that can make networking feel even harder. So some feelings that you may have about networking that are on this slide are fear, discomfort, intimidation. You're fearful of being rejected. You're fearful of looking needy or of bothering someone. I hear that so often from my clients. I don't want to bother that person. I don't know. I don't want to interrupt them. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. And deep down, most human beings want to be accepted. So if not, even enthusiastically embraced, and by approaching strangers or asking for help, you automatically put yourself at risk of non-acceptance or discomfort with aspects of networking. When I ask people how they feel about networking, generally, most people say, oh, I'm really uncomfortable talking to strangers, making small talk, having an agenda. And so really the best way to develop comfort with networking is to keep doing it like anything. Some people have just a dislike for or a skepticism about networking or its value. Networking can carry a negative stereotype. And why would you want to involve yourself in something that people view as negative? Some people have a lack of confidence or insecurity, especially about approaching senior people. In a little bit, I'll give you some really tangible tips about how to approach senior people. And by the way, senior people are not the only people you should be networking with. I'm a firm believer every human being can help each other, whatever their level or age is. So, but oh, my battery's running low. I know this is really weird, but I have to go get my charger. This is the first. Okay, sorry about that. But we don't want to go dead. So here we go. Hopefully that worked. Okay, so I'm back. That was interesting. And then I think I was talking about insecurity and a lack of confidence. We can tend to be intimidated by people who have achieved a great deal or seem to possess some sort of status that we don't have. And it's easy to think that we don't have anything to offer people like this. And also your cancer experience may have diminished your confidence even more. And a bit later, as I said, I'll share some more tips for feeling more comfortable with that. The mentality that you can or should do something all on your own without help from anyone else. We're socialized as human beings to be competitive and even compete against each other instead of a goal. And most of you have grown up with a keen sense of individual responsibility. So it's likely that your values have been shaped based on your individual accomplishments. And networking is definitely an activity that requires you to interface with a lot of different people. So let's continue talking about why networking feels hard and some other common barriers that exist. A lack of understanding of how to network. People will often say to me, I don't really know what to do first. Who do I talk to? What do I say? All of those kinds of things. What's the etiquette? A question I've gotten over the years so frequently is, well, how many times can I reach out to someone before, and they don't answer me before I stop? I mean, I think that's probably in the top 5 questions I've gotten in the years that I've been talking about networking. So I'll repeat this message later. If you treat others the way you want to be treated, with professionalism, with courtesy, and with sensitivity, networking will become easier for you. So if you just keep those things in mind, you'll be surprised at how much easier it will feel. Not knowing who to reach out to. My premise is always, it's just easier to start with the people you already know, even if they don't understand what you do or what you're looking for. They're people who you might have a comfort level with, people who know you, and that's always the best place to start. And then not being prepared with what I call your packaging, which would be like a clear message of what you're trying to do. What kind of job are you looking for? What do you want it to look like? Sort of what we call in my business the elevator pitch. although a lot of people never really get on elevators that often. But your story, who you are, and keeping it concise and interesting is just another challenge. And I've talked about that in many of my a couple webinars that I've done for Cancer and Careers this year. But that's something that you really need to pay a lot of attention to, and just kind of open up a document and get that on paper and practice it with people. Other major obstacles are time management. And staying organized. It's easy to let other things take precedence over networking, especially if it's something that you don't really want to do. But while you're probably pretty aware of the principles of good time management, when push comes to shove, it's all about having little goals, like how many people do you want to talk to this week, how many people that you know, and how many people that are new. Just trying to keep focused and stay motivated. And especially if you're working and you're trying to network to find another job, that's very hard for people. They have to sort of find a way to weave it into their jobs. And that's when they tend to neglect networking a lot more. So the best way to fit networking into your life is just really to make it a priority by weaving it in, doing a little bit like every day or every other day, and just sort of documenting it. Your time is fixed, but it's the way you manage the activities in your time is really what matters. And if possible, use a digital system for organizing and documenting your activity. One more key point is that the fact that most people do not network as often when they are working. If this is true, and at some point you need to look for another job, it'll feel harder psychologically for you to revisit your network, because you feel kind of like, this is what I hear all the time. Oh, I feel funny calling Scott or texting Scott because I haven't talked to him in 4 years, and Scott's a really friendly guy, and I'm sure he'll be happy and thrilled, and he hasn't reached out to you either. So you're kind of both in the same boat. So, but it is, and that will happen, but it is easier to just reach out when you've been doing it a little bit more regularly, and it's definitely been proven that attitude drives behavior. So if you let any of these feelings of what I've just described, the different things that you might be feeling about networking, dominate you, then unfortunately you will not be successful at networking. So the only way you can shift your attitude about networking is if you face your feelings and continue to try it, and then you'll begin to see positive results. So then moving on, there's some what I call sort of hidden barriers, these things that people might not speak about as often. These are blockers that quietly hold some of you back and maybe are less obvious. They're sort of the thoughts and the identity shifts and the real life constraints that don't always get talked about. So before we jump into tactics, we have to acknowledge something deeper, that there are internal barriers to networking that people rarely say out loud. And so finally, one of them is, and this is particular when you've had a cancer diagnosis, or when you've been out on treatment, or you haven't been working, or you were even working, but you don't feel the same as you did before, you can feel behind, like you've fallen behind in your career. I hear that often at Cancer and Careers, or you feel disconnected from your professional identity, where it was something that was first and foremost. It doesn't seem that way right now, and you don't know how to think about recovering that. Many people I work with feel like they've lost their professional self after time away from health, or even as a caregiver, or any major life transition. And you might think, well, who am I going to reach out to? What do I even say I do? That feeling of being behind can quietly stop you from reaching out at all. So the reframe that you might want to do is, you're not starting from scratch, you're restarting from experience. Your identity may have evolved, but it's still very much there. You haven't lost your identity. And then there's the gap comment. This comment used to be, for us at Cancer and Careers, the number one question we would get. I have a gap in my employment. I have a gap on my resume. What will I say? How will it be received? Well, gaps can feel like there's something you need to explain or you need to apologize for, but quite the contrary, you don't. You want to be prepared to say something about it if the question does come up. One of the big favors that the pandemic did for us is kind of really diminished the importance or the significance, shall I say, of gaps. Employers tend to be less concerned about it. And now, I hate to say it, but there are many more people who are unemployed who have gaps. So between, those of you who may have gaps because of your health issues, you're joined by a ton of people out there that do have gaps. So just realize that when you're networking, if you need to, it's a safer place for you to share your story and talk about why you left your last position. Always being careful to frame it very professionally. But when you're networking, it's a little more informal. It's much more human, and it helps you sort of frame your reason for having a gap with confidence rather than defensiveness. And thinking networking is self-promotion instead of relationship building. This is probably the biggest mindset barrier that people can have. If you think networking means selling yourself or asking for a job, of course it feels uncomfortable and even inauthentic. But strong networkers don't approach the process that way. They approach it with curiosity about the other person or their industry or their career. They approach networking with generosity and a long-term mindset. So it's not, how do I impress this person? It's how do I connect with this person? When you make that shift, networking becomes much more natural and much more effective. So if networking has felt hard, it may not be about your skills. It may be about these underlying beliefs. And the good news is that once you shift your mindset, the behaviors become a lot easier. So, and then I have a couple more slides about this. The next slide, it's also about hidden barriers. Chris, if we could move to the next slide, thank you, is many people really struggle to explain their situation clearly, especially if their path isn't straightforward. And a lot of people have ziggy-zaggy paths. It's much more common. So that can lead to your overthinking or you're avoiding the conversation altogether because you don't know how to explain your situation. There's also a real fear of saying the wrong things. So people will hold back or play it too safe when in reality, most networking conversations are more relaxed than we really expect. And then there's comparison. I'm really a believer that rarely is comparison a healthy tendency. It's easy to feel less than when you're looking around or scrolling on LinkedIn and looking at how accomplished people seem to be. And that can also shrink how you show up. So again, these are not skill issues. They're confidence and mindset barriers. And the shift is this: you're not there to impress, you're there to connect. Okay, and then we have one more slide about hidden barriers, often unspoken. In the next slide. So these are very real, often unspoken challenges that can make networking feel harder than it is. Fatigue or limited energy. Networking takes effort physically and mentally. And when your energy is low, even sending an email or certainly attending an event can feel like a lot. Unpredictable schedules due to your health needs, due to appointments, treatments, scans, or just not feeling well can make it hard to plan ahead or follow through consistently, which can also impact your momentum. And deciding how much to share, another very common question we get at Cancer and Careers: what do I say? How much do I say about your cancer diagnosis or what you're going through? Do I talk about my experience or not? If so, how much is appropriate? And that uncertainty can certainly create hesitation. So you really just want to make decisions about what to share and what not to share. Scott mentioned I do the resume review service, and that often I'll get the question, do I say anything on my resume? If someone has a longer gap, I will suggest that you do what LinkedIn does and put career break on your resume and I've seen a couple really creative descriptions of a career break. And mostly people will say, I'm ready to go back to work. I'm healthy again. I'm in good shape, and there's nothing wrong with putting that on your resume, but I wouldn't do that unless it's a significant gap. And then, you want to kind of wait a while if you're planning on disclosing that you've had cancer, because you realize that people can be rather judgmental. A concern about bias or being defined by illness. That's very, very normal. A worry that you'll be seen differently, or you'll be reduced to just your cancer experience rather than being recognized for your full professional value. All of this is completely valid, and it's important to acknowledge that networking may need to look different, and that's okay. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the sort of the more how to do it kind of things. So what I did when I created a version of this webinar a few years ago, and networking is like, I have been speaking, training, coaching about networking for over 20 years. Not much has changed about it, except for, maybe the technology, digital piece. So when I really thought about it, I thought, well, where do you go to find people that you can network with? It's one thing to say, go on LinkedIn and look for people. And then people just get and LinkedIn is one place you look for people, of course, but it just feels very overwhelming. So what I wanted to do is just break it down and identify sort of buckets of types of people that you can reach out to that will all bring you to different sorts of expertise and connection. So the first one is very obviously, as I said earlier, start with whom you know. Your personal and professional network. So that means reaching out to your current contacts. So everybody has contacts. However, most people think they don't have very many. Even if you have over 500, which many people do on LinkedIn, there's a good chance you really don't know 500 people. So you really want to start with your inner circle and then spread out, so you go to your inner circle, you say, hey, I know we were buddies in college. I'm looking for a job and I'm just trying to, sort of talk to some people before I go to people that I think could actually provide leads for me, and just sort of practice a little bit, or talk to you because you're friendly or because you know a lot about me, and just start there. If you can't figure out like who's in my network other than the obvious 10 or 15 or 20 people, it's kind of easier to put people into categories like this that are on the slide. So friends, past colleagues, former classmates, teachers, neighbors, your kids, friends, parents, and then professionals like real estate agents. My dentist was always phenomenal at trying to come up with business leads for me. It was really funny because he's a very outgoing guy, and he still does that. I think it's great. Accountants, and there's so many different types of people that you interact with. Insurance brokers know tons of people. And all you have to do is ask, and you'd be amazed at these are people that you're either their clients or you know them in a different context, and they're going to be pretty happy to help if they can. And then write them down, write everybody down. Because whenever I talk to my clients, I say, well, think right now, I want you to think of 4 people you haven't talked to. And they're like, oh, I know this person. Oh, this person, that person. So you'd be surprised at how many people you can come up with. And then either if you're not connected with them on social media, or you haven't talked to them in a while, if you're not a social media person, then just reach out to them and then track, who you've talked to and when you've talked to. But that's the easiest group, really. So start there. And then the second group is what I just mentioned, which is LinkedIn. So you want to keep your LinkedIn profile updated. You don't have to it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, I did a webinar on LinkedIn, and so maybe some of you have seen it, but basically you're using LinkedIn because it's clearly the most widely used business-oriented social network in the world. So why wouldn't you use that as a resource? It's at 800 million or something right now, people, and not that they're all actively using it, but networking on LinkedIn is definitely not just connecting. It's about it is also about making meaningful relationships, and they vary by degree. You're going to have the best luck with your first connections. And I would say like every single person that you talk to, like I always offer people to connect with me, and I'm still surprised at how few people, like however many people who are viewing this webinar right now, how few people actually reach out to me and connect with me, because I can help you, because I am very connected and I am intimately aware of like what you're experiencing in a lot of different ways. So just connect with people you meet. You know, I took Amtrak from New York City. I live in Connecticut, but from New York City, no, from Connecticut, I took it to Washington, D.C. on Sunday, and I came back last night. And I got stuck in those seats with like table, where you're facing each other. I don't love those seats. I think I was late in booking it. So on the way there were two women. We didn't know each other. By the end, you know how women are. We were chatting it up. One woman lived in another country. The other woman lived in Brooklyn. And we all went on WhatsApp and connected in a group and everything. It was great. And I feel like we can all help each other in a certain way. And then even on the way back, people weren't as friendly, but there was this group of people that worked for a fashion label, and they were really nice. And I learned a lot about them, and that was useful for me too. So it's amazing. And I didn't do it today because I've been slammed, but I will now go and connect with every single person that I met and say, hey, met you on Amtrak, on whatever, Tuesday night. So that's a really fun way to use LinkedIn too. And then just when you're on LinkedIn, if you have connections and they post things, comment on what they've posted. So you don't have to say much, or you can even like it. You don't even have to say anything. And then just say, hey, can I help you? Or if you see someone who's also looking for work, what are you looking for? Maybe we can be, look for work buddies. And then certainly if you're on LinkedIn and you haven't filled in your open to opportunities section, you want to do that if you're job hunting. It gives you the opportunity to put in 5 titles, put in your geography where you would like to work, and whether you'd like remote or hybrid or in person. So LinkedIn is definitely not something to be ignored. And even if you're not that familiar, like Scott just, told you that I did it last month. And so you can look on Cancer and Careers website. But even if you're not familiar, just start small, just start by connecting with a few people, looking at some posts, even looking at the groups. It's just a wonderful, bountiful resource for networking. Okay. So next we'll go on to a category that, maybe we all don't know a lot of these people, but maybe I need to call it something else besides influential people. But influential people are people who have jobs, who are existences or identities where they network all the time. They may not even look at themselves as people who network all the time, but they do. So people that run nonprofits, people who run trade or professional associations, chambers of commerce, business consultants who are, doing like I'm not saying I'm influential, but I connect with so many hundreds and hundreds of people. So it's likely if I really think hard and you tell me specifically how I can help you, I might be able to find someone for you to talk to. Executive directors, I mentioned, people who do fundraising or development. They definitely know a lot of people. Salespeople. I spent the first part of my career in sales. And I'll argue to say I'm kind of in sales still in my own business. But salespeople know so many people, and they're so comfortable with talking to strangers, and they're so comfortable with connecting, because they're always kind of thinking, if there's going to be people I need to meet that are going to help me sell whatever I'm selling. And then there's sort of, a lot of people that work for the government. That's a big population. I mean, maybe not as big as it used to be, but there's still a lot of people. I was taking an Uber through DC, looking at all the buildings. I don't go to DC that often. And I was like, wow, there's still a lot of people that work in these giant buildings, that are all like government agencies. So even though a lot of people were let go, there's still a lot there, and they know a lot of people. So that's the influential people piece. And you don't have to be intimidated. It's just thinking about people that have jobs that meet a lot of people. The next group of people, maybe a smaller group, I would say, but I felt compelled to add it. People and companies in the media. So that would be people in the news. There's a lot of like local business journals. I mean, if you go to bizjournals.com. There's a business journal in almost every major city or major regional area. People in the news, announcements about people, trade publications all talk about people who have been promoted or people who have won awards. So whatever your specific industry is, you're going to have those trade associations and publications specific, whether you're a lawyer or, it doesn't matter. They're out there. So you can find people's names that way. And then even calendars of online or virtual or even in-person events will list speakers, and speakers are good people to connect with as well. And just an interesting way to find people. And again, they're just people like us. So they would be flattered if you reached out to them, even if you don't know them. Hey, I see you're speaking at this conference. Love your topic. Wondering, I can't make the conference. Wondering if I can connect with you, and then do that on LinkedIn. Okay. And then there are what I did just alluded to, there are trade associations and organizations. I think it's hysterical that there is literally a trade association or organization for every single job that exists. There's a zookeeper association. I mean, there's a diamond grader association. There's an association for clowns. And then there are certainly, those are the professional ones. And then you can't forget about civic, cultural, religious, the Masons, I don't even, there's so many government groups, people that have like interests or cycling or kayaking or mountain climbing, there's so many. So just think about like who you are, what your interests are, what's your industry, and go find those groups. And people often forget about it. And then I might throw this in because I didn't really add it and I always forget about it, but alumni, if you're an alum for a school, that is a number one great place to go, because there's something about someone reaching out and saying, hey, I went to Penn and you did too. And there's this sister and brotherhood that exists with that. So that's another great place to go find people. And there's almost always an online directory that you can access, So, and then there's one more, and that seems really obvious: recruiters and search firms. Okay, so I'll agree that recruiters and search firms might not be the best at networking. I have a kind of friend, more colleague, business acquaintance, a guy who's lovely and wonderful. He's got his own recruiting firm. He refers so many people to me for, resume writing and career coaching. And I'm always like, Ben, and he's a lot younger than I am. He's just lovely. And I'm like, Ben, why do you do that? And he said, Julie, it's a value add for our business. We don't write resumes. If I know you, I trust you, the quality of your work. If I can refer a client to you and you can write a resume and they're happy, that's value add for me. Now, I wish more recruiters and search firms were like that. They're not, but you will find some. You will find one or two that are going to be more open. And the best thing you can do is if you ever get approached by a recruiter or a search firm, and they, are approaching you about a specific job that they think you're a fit for, if you're in that kind of career, maybe you're not interested, but you say, I know maybe one person I can refer to you. And that's a good way to create a relationship with recruiters. But as far as recruiters, they're really just working mostly on specific jobs that fit experience or skills. They're almost always open to connecting on LinkedIn. So that's great. But don't be offended if they don't respond to you if you reach out again, because they're probably not going to. And you definitely, when you want to find recruiters, other than going on LinkedIn, you want to talk to people in your network that do what you do, and because you're trying to find recruiters. I find it funny. People often reach out to me, people with all sorts of jobs, and say, hey, do you know any recruiters? And I'm like, I go blank, like I do, but because recruiters, they're all over the world. Some of them are small, some of them are big firms. They all specialize in an industry or a functional expertise. They all have their clients that they work with regularly. They don't work with every single company in their industry. So there's so many recruiters that it's almost impossible for me to say to a human being, oh yeah, I know 8 recruiters that you can that will help you. You have to get to know the recruiters and know what their specialties are and know what industries they work in. So, and remember, the last thing I want to say about recruiters is they don't work with career changers. It's very unusual for that to happen. So you can only work with a recruiter or a search firm if you do exactly what they tend to place. Okay, so now we're going to move on to steps to inviting people to network. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I lengthened this webinar and I don't want to run out of time. But you have to have a goal and know why you're reaching out. So number one, your goal is not, I'm looking for a job. Yeah, that is what you're looking for. But you want to, you can say it like more, I'm exploring project management roles and I would really like your perspective, or I'm thinking about switching into the career that you're in, and I'd love to talk to you and have your insight. You've got to choose the right people, people that have shared connections, alumni, those kinds of people. You definitely need to do research. Not a lot, but just look at their LinkedIn profile or their background. And then when you send a message, keep it short, 3 to 4 sentences at most. And the goal here is just to start a conversation. That's it, not tell your life story. And then simply ask, can we talk? And then moving on to more steps to inviting people. Make the ask easy, whatever it is that you have. People are busy. So a very simple, small ask. I'm thinking about this industry. I'd like to hear the 3 things you like about it and the 3 things that you think are challenges. When you reach out to someone and they don't respond, normalize that people miss messages, and a polite follow-up is professional, not annoying, but not 10 follow-ups. I kind of go with the rule of thumb of 3. And then make sure you prepare for a conversation. And the way you prepare is to have questions. That's it. 3 to 5 questions in your pocket so that you can ask something. When you're preparing, you're shifting from what can I get to what can I learn? So remember, I said earlier, curiosity is important. So questions, what can I learn? Curiosity builds connections. When someone is networking with me and they say, I'm really curious to see how you got into what you do, I feel like, wow, they actually are interested in me. And it doesn't happen very often, I'll tell you that. And then just close the loop. Always send a thank you. It doesn't matter what it is, quick, to the point. And then, hopefully it'll evolve into a relationship over time. And it may not, and that's okay. So the next slide is just talking about reciprocity, which if you've ever heard me talk about networking, this is one of my hot buttons. It's always about focusing on the other person. But it's also asking for something specific, and always asking how I can help you, even if you have no clue how you can help someone. And every conversation with an action or a next step. I'm going to send you that article that I mentioned to you. And don't expect anything from people you interact with, and you will always, always, always be surprised by who helps you. So, and then let's just talk briefly about making small talk, because that's one of the things on the next slide. One of the things that is, Chris, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thanks. One of the things that people aren't comfortable with, and even I feel funny, like when I was testifying in court for part of my business in Washington or in Virginia, that's what I was doing. And all these other witnesses, and they were all men and I was the only woman, which I could care less about. And they were all like doing the bro stuff, and I'm like, okay, I can be a bro. So I started making bro talk, which I've accomplished over the years, and it was pretty funny. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know, should I just sit here and then let them talk to each other? And I said, why would I do that? I can make small talk. And I just started, I jumped in and I just asked questions, and they loved to talk about themselves. And it was great. And it worked really well. And then I ended up exchanging some information, even though they might have been on the other side of the trial. But and you can do it. It's harder to do it on video and online. It's easier to do it in person. And then we also know, obviously, you always avoid controversial topics, especially now. Everything's a controversial topic. So just keep all those discussions to yourself and just talk about general things. And again, when you always focus on the other person, it's amazing at how much you can get someone to talk. And the next slide is just some examples of questions. I'm not going to read all these to you. Excuse me, but asking, like Scott and I were talking before we started this webinar, and he was like, I said, I've had a million jobs. And he goes, what kind of jobs have you had? And so I was telling him I was an Easter bunny and I worked as a bartender, and when I was younger. And, it was kind of fun. And then always there, everybody pretty much watches television. And then most people love to eat. On the train, we were all talking about our favorite food and our favorite restaurants, and travel is a big one. So there's always fun questions that you can ask people that help really ease the way into the small talk conversation piece, because you're going to move into something a little bit more serious, but it's great to start off with the small talk and the ice breaking. So then I want to talk about senior leaders, because I promised you I'd give you some tips around that. So on the next slide, how do you reach senior leaders on LinkedIn or email? The goal is, again, not to ask for a job. It's to start a conversation. So I'm hoping you'll remember that I say start a conversation. You want to eventually develop a relationship. You want to be curious and ask questions. So those are some of the big takeaways for today's webinar. If you can get introduced to a senior person by someone, obviously that's optimal, but you can't always. So you definitely want to do your homework about the person. Not the obvious, they have XX job at XX company, but just something that you can find out about them on LinkedIn or elsewhere if you're just Googling them. Senior professionals are pretty busy, but we're all busy. So brevity is important. That will signal respect and confidence on your part. And on LinkedIn, engaging with their posts is a good way to seem like a little familiar to that senior person. If you can do that, if you're sending an email to a senior leader, your subject line will determine whether it gets opened. So, think about a clever subject line. And if they don't respond, again, follow up once, maybe twice, and then move on. And then on the next slide, I have some examples of how you can outreach. So I'm not going to read these, but you go back to and so these are some examples of how you reach out for a connection, and then how you follow up. And so hopefully you all have these slides so you can hang on to these. And then the next slide is on the next slide. It's more of an example of an outreach for email. So the subject line, remember I said you want something interesting, brief question about your work or if you were referred by someone, is the subject line. The subject line is always the hardest for people. I struggle with those too, actually. So that's what AI is for. Hey, AI, I want to ChatGPT. I want an interesting subject line. This is the email I'm sending. This is the context. This is the tone, So that's for email. And then what do senior leaders actually... Oh, wait, go to the next slide, because I'm trying to remember what the next slide is. Oh, yeah, making the right impression in person. No pitch. Reference something specific, always question, don't monopolize their time. I remember when I spoke a lot in person, there was always like 3 people that would just stand in front of me, even though there was a line behind them, and just keep asking me questions and keep talking about their situation. And I always felt so bad, because clearly they needed help and they wanted an audience. But then I would look, and there's all these people standing there patiently. And I would always feel so terrible having to say, I'm really sorry, but I need to ask you to reach out to me in a different way. And, because there's people waiting behind you. Some people just don't exit gracefully, and they don't realize they never should monopolize time. And then always follow up, of course. And then just a little bit more about senior leaders. They respond better to a specific comment, question, or ask. They respond better to not you promoting yourself, but being curious about them. They respond better to clarity over long explanation. Everybody does, really. And they respond better to confidence and respect for their time. So, and then as far as your mindset, there about, it's kind of goes hand in hand with the stuff I was talking about earlier about your mindset psychologically. You're not bothering anybody. And if you are bothering them, they will probably make that clear to you. And that's okay. Like I joke and always say, you can't have chemistry with everyone. Why most of us just marry one person at a time, You're starting a professional conversation. The power dynamic is more exaggerated in your head than it is real. Many senior professionals really enjoy helping and mentoring. It's part of how they give back. And so you're not bothering people. Just try it, and you'll find out. And then just the almost final topic here is networking etiquette, which is your approach and mindset, preparation and communication. I already brought all this up. Moving to the next slide. Respect and timing, always ask for a certain amount of time and honor that time. Always send a thank you. So I recognize that some of this is repetitive in this webinar, but the pieces of information that are repetitive are the ones that I feel very strongly about, that if you do pay attention to those, you will be very successful at networking. And then just a little bit more about networking etiquette on the next slide. So these are the mistakes people make. And I hate to highlight mistakes, but these are important. So asking for a job right away, not making it easy for your contact to help you. So, I often get people saying, "Hey, Julie, so-and-so referred me to you. They say you know a lot of people. I'm looking for a job in supply chain management." And then they're quiet. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you. Well, I'm just looking for people. Who do you know in supply chain management? And then what happens? I go blank. If you're not specific, this is how I'd love help. It's, again, a simple ask. That's going to be much more helpful for someone to help you. Of course, reciprocity. They send really long, unfocused or generic or confusing messages. They're not prepared for any kind of a conversation with you. And really bad, they don't follow up. So those are some mistakes. Going to the next slide. This is a huge long list. So just look at these slides later, all the different things that you can do to stay in touch with your network, because people really struggle with this topic. What do I say? What do I do? And there's so many ways that you can reach out to people. So there's this slide, then there's another slide, the next slide, inviting people to things, forwarding links, even giving them an update. Like, we talked and you were so helpful. I just want to keep you apprised of where I am in my job search. Or even sending, I ask people a lot to send me target companies. Send me 3 companies that you're interested in. Let me jump on LinkedIn and see if I can find someone that might be helpful for you. And then the next slide, this is actually the last slide, I believe, which is, I updated this a lot. So I like this. So I just have to figure out how to not rush the end. But networking is so important. I know you can tell I'm passionate about it. It has done everything for me in every aspect of my life. I'm so grateful that it's a skill that I developed as a very young person, and I've continued to develop it. And there's a lot of obstacles that get in the way. The whole virtual thing really threw people for the loop to how do I network doing that, but if you're a strong networker, ultimately, you'll be approached regularly with requests and opportunities. So just make it a way of life, not something that you just need to do to find a job. So I'll turn it over to Scott for a couple questions.
Thank you, Julie. So just before we get to Q&A, and again, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to them. But a little housekeeping before we get there. If you have any questions following today's session, you can always reach out to us at cancerandcareers@cew.org, or my information is on this slide here. Feel free to reach out to me directly as well. And then we have some upcoming events. Our next webinar is going to be July 8th which is part one of a two-part Communicating Effectively series. The second part will be August 5th. You do not need to come to both of them. If you want to just come to part two or you want to just come to part one, you can, but you'll get the full scope of things if you come to both of them. And then later on in the year, in October, we have Navigating the Virtual Landscape Work and Job Search. So, focusing on the digital world that we're living in there. So we hope you can join us for more of those. And then we also have our Spanish language webinars coming up. If you speak Spanish, or if any of your friends, your clients, your patients, if anyone you know who speaks Spanish, feel free to pass this along to them. The next one in that series is going to be on June 3rd, which is going to be job search. And then we have September 16th for balancing work and mental health. And then the last one in the Spanish series is going to be December 2nd for balancing work and caregiving. So any Spanish speaking caregivers out there would love to help us spread the word. And then we also have our national conference coming up on June 26th. This is going to be an all-day event happening on Zoom with different speakers and panelists. It's going to be really great. And then we also have our West Coast conference coming up on October 17th, which again is an all-day event happening on Zoom. The West Coast and really refers to the time zone that it's happening in, but you can join from anywhere in the world. So we hope you'll join us for those. And oh no, what just happened? Okay, here we go. We're back. And then again, these are for anyone requesting CEs or PDCs. These are the requirements. Again, you'll get this all in an email tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. And I think Chris is dropping a link in the chat with the evaluation. You can also scan this QR code to get the evaluation as well. So I'm going to leave this up as we go into Q&A. So Julie, the first question I have here is, let's see. I just put one in here that was in the chat. Sorry, I'm moving windows around. There we go. When trying to connect with people on LinkedIn, should we refrain from sending connection requests during the interview process?
So I'm making the assumption that it's to people that you're interviewing with. Yeah, I would do it either before you have the interviews or after you have the interviews, but not during.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
The next question, I got an answer for this, but I want to hear your thoughts on it too. As an introvert, what does someone say when reaching out to people to network?
The same thing an extrovert does. You ask
That was going to be my
questions.
answer to it, Julie. I don't think there's any difference
No, there
between
isn't.
the
Not at all.
strategy
I mean,
around
yeah,
it.
do you have to muster up the different type of energy? Sure. But I'll tell you, just yeah, a couple days, I'm a big extrovert, as you might have figured out. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to say. And I had to kind of coax myself. And it was weird. And then once I was in and it was normal. So we all have to do this mental gyration, to get ourselves in that place.
See, and I feel like I'm the opposite. I'm naturally an introvert, which people always think are always surprised by because I can talk to people
Yeah,
on
you
Zoom and I
can.
can present in front of hundreds of people, but it's really just a psychological, like psyching myself up and almost playing a part and pretending
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
I go out there and I'm like, for the next hour at this cocktail party, I am going to be Julie Jansen. I'm going to be the extrovert. People are going to love me after this. And then
Uh,
after that hour, I need to like go in a corner and recharge my battery for a little bit. But I think there's really no difference in the
no.
approach.
Have a script. Just have a simple script that you just practice. That's all. Have three
Yeah.
questions that you practice.
We also talk
Yeah.
sometimes about having, and you touched on this a little bit, having uh topics for small talk to get into it too if you need it, if it's an in-person thing or a informational interview. So like, what are you
Yeah.
watching? What are you reading? What's the last restaurant? Any restaurant recommendations you have? My cousin's in town and I want to take them somewhere special. Like any kind of
Yeah.
thing. It doesn't have to be related to the job, but something you can kind of prep and practice beforehand as well. This is a question from earlier that again I think you hit, but maybe we reiterate. What does daily networking look like?
Well, I mean, depending on like, are you using LinkedIn? Are you calling someone? Are you emailing someone? Are you texting someone? But you basically decide, maybe you do it on Monday, maybe you do it on Sunday, maybe you do it on Friday. You decide, who are the four people I'm going to reach out to? And what am I going to, what's my question for them? What's my ask if it's appropriate? And just like plan it a little bit. And so then every day you're plugging one of those in, whatever that looks like. And it might be an in-person event. Who knows? It might be sending someone something. So, but just, I think the goal there is planning it rather than being very impromptu and spontaneous because the likelihood of you doing it is going to be a lot less.
Yeah, and I think back to years ago, I was unemployed for a few months and was on unemployment, and part of the requirement, at least in New York, I don't know what it is in other
Yeah,
states,
yeah,
was you
everywhere.
had to make at least three connections or three attempts at a job every week. So that was either like sending out three applications or reaching out to three people for networking, which, is an imperfect system, and we can get into that another day. But thinking of it like that, of like having a quota of I'm gonna do four things for networking this week, and maybe it's emailing a former coworker to catch up and get a drink or get lunch. Maybe it's going on LinkedIn and scrolling and finding new connections. Maybe it's, picking those four things, and they all might be different, and it might be a different thing every day, but trying to do like one or two of those every day, I think can be useful especially when you're
Yeah.
like actively looking for something.
And Scott, you bring up I didn't think of it this way, but you bring up an interesting point, and that is it's a great idea if you can to have an accountability partner. So in Scott's case, it was the state of New York. But but if you have an accountability partner, like, hey, I need to reach out to four people this week, and I want you to check in with me and see if I did it. That might be helpful because I've done that with big goals myself, and it's like I don't want to tell them I didn't do it, so I'm going to do it. So yeah,
I agree. I think that definitely helps. And then you can kind of strategize and be like, oh, this really worked for me. I'm going to take that idea and do that. Or this was really frustrating. Even just having someone to be like, this was frustrating. I've sent out four emails and nobody's responded to me. Like that accountability partner can really help you get through that.
yeah.
We're actually over time, so this will be the last question we have. Again, if we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. Please reach out to us, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll make sure to get you an answer for that. But the last one I have here is, what can I do to build my confidence? I've tried networking and just feels like I always hit a dead end, and I'm having trouble getting back into it.
Um, well, I think that goes to like just building confidence in general is like taking little risks in other parts of your life, building a little fan club, like having an accountability partner, go to therapy. I mean, there's a million things. You try something brand new that you've never tried before. So it's like I mean, when you don't have confidence, it isn't usually just about networking. It's usually bigger than that. And so what you can do to remember your past achievements, remember what your professional identity maybe was and will be again, all those journal. I mean, there's a million things. And then I hate to say it, but you got to keep putting your toe in the networking pool and keep trying it. And like Scott said, try different types of networking. So have a drink with a friend or someone you don't know as well, or go on a date if you're single, and that could be networking. I went on a date recently, and the guy's son needed help, and we weren't a match at all, but I offered to help his son, and he was like so surprised, and I was like, yeah, that's networking. So
Yeah.
so it's all those things that come to mind.
I'm going to second the therapist is a really great tool here, or a social worker if you're, getting treatment in a hospital and you have somebody available, even just for a one-off session, can be
Yeah.
really great to boost that. I also have someone who I worked with years ago who used to have a folder in their email for accomplishments. So anytime that somebody would send them a nice email congratulating them, or anytime that an award came through, or anytime that they broke a goal, a sales goal, or whatever the achievement was, they put in a folder to be reminded of on days like that where you're
That's great.
feeling low and you feel like what's the, I'm never going to get a job. I'm untalented. I'm not good at what I do. Nobody wants me. You can go in that folder and be reminded of everything that you've had in the past and give yourself a little boost and co-signing all the things Julie said. I
I
think
need
too,
a
just
folder like that for dating.
I know, right? But
That's great.
I think too, just acknowledging too and not beating yourself up over it. Everybody's gonna have highs and lows, especially in a job search. There could be a week where you have three interviews in one week, and there can be a month where you hear from nobody. But
Yeah.
having that kind of up and down and cyclical nature is just part of it. It's not you. Everybody feels dejected or, you know, frustrated at some point in a job search, and networking, I think, is part of that process as well. So there are days where you might not feel it, and if you need to give yourself a day off from networking, give yourself a day off from networking. Even if you're trying to do it every day and hit those goals like we talked about, I think taking a day off for self-care and
Absolutely.
doing watching a movie, going to yoga, going on a hike, whatever it is that you find to be a stress relief and get back to yourself and center yourself, I think is definitely worth doing there too. Well, Julie, this is the time we have. Thank you so much for being here again. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you'll see you at another webinar soon or another event coming up. But thank you again.